I'm joined now by Senator Chris Murphy. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, man.
So we're in the immediate aftermath of the presidential address in the chamber. You were not there because I guess you wanted to preserve some sanity or some semblance of your
Looking
soul.
out for my mental
Mental
health.
health, yeah. There was a bit of manufactured outrage that we're seeing from the right, where Donald Trump presented a young boy who has cancer and gave him access to being a Secret Service member. And Democrats didn't stand up, and Republicans are spending the day after this basically throwing a fit over the fact that fainting spells over the fact that Democrats didn't stand. And yet conspicuously absent in all of their discussion of this is the fact that Republicans took away cancer research funding for kids in the initial bill that they had when Elon Musk first came onto the scene and they first got their majority in Congress. So can I have your reaction to that?
I mean, listen, there were a whole bunch of touching moments in the speech, but this isn't daytime TV. This is the state of the nation. And the fact of the matter is the president is in charge of deciding whether we're going to cure cancer or not. And he's deciding not to. Right? And that's the bottom line. The president has decided to do these massive cuts to cancer research, to kids' cancer research, to adult disease research. And the reality is there's going to be a lot of people who will die because there are research programs shutting down all over the country and getting ready to shut down. So I get it. The president spent a lot of time talking about things tonight to distract the country from the real story. And the real story is the destruction of research, the handover of the government to the billionaires, the collapse of the Medicaid program, the crashing stock market. Some of those moments were touching, but it has nothing to do with the actual storyline that's going to affect a lot of Americans, including the fact that diseases aren't going to be cured, at least as fast as we could, because the president has decided to take an axe to our research programs.
Okay, to that point, I mean, this is funding, notwithstanding the fact that Trump wants to take an axe to it, notwithstanding the fact that Elon wants to take an axe to it. This is funding that was still legally allocated by Congress. It's Congress's prerogative whether or not to move forward with this funding, and you all have decided to do so. And so where do we stand right now in terms of you all being able to basically jealously guard your autonomy as the people in charge of the purse, and Trump's desire to just have his hand in all things, to basically have the unilateral power to do all things in government?
Yeah, I mean, listen, this is why I say that we are in a constitutional crisis right now, right? There's a lot of folks who say, well, we might be in one soon. But on this specific issue, the Congress has been very clear about how we fund medical research in this country. In fact, we're very clear about how the money is allocated. And Trump has just ignored Congress. So we give, money for the direct research, and then we give money to the universities for these indirect costs, like keeping the lights on, the machines that you need to do the research, and the research assistants. Trump's just decided to put a cleaver into those indirect costs. That's illegal. That's absolutely illegal. Congress has said exactly how much you have to spend on direct and indirect costs. That's why it's a constitutional crisis right now. The president is not abiding by the way in which Congress has said money has to be spent. And why is that? Because he wants to use that spending to demand loyalty, right? So he's specifically targeting research programs because it goes to thousands of universities in this country. And he wants to compel those universities to only engage in conservative speech. Right. He wants to kill liberal speech, progressive values, student dissent on those campuses. So he decides to cut off research funding. And then let me tell you what he's going to do. He's going to start to turn it back on in the red states. He's going to turn it back on for university presidents that pledge loyalty to Donald Trump. And anywhere where there's campus protests speaking out against Donald Trump, their research funding will be cut off. That's why our founding fathers said Congress has to be in charge of spending, not an executive, because that puts them in a position to be a despot, to be a king. That's why it's a constitutional crisis right now.
And so, look, the right has been really effective at investing in the future, right? And we've seen that with the way that they've even focused on Prager University. We've seen that with the way they focused on their independent media sources 10 years before Democrats did. And so, given the fact that they are focusing on the future and kids and trying to proselytize young people in this country and using congressionally allocated funds as a carrot to dangle. Where do we stand right now then? Is Congress going to be able to step in or is because Republicans control the House and the Senate, is it basically just carte blanche for Trump to continue barreling ahead and just kind of usurping all this power from Congress?
Well, listen, they control the White House, they control the House, they control the Senate. So there is a limit to what Democrats can do. We can slow things down, but we are the minority party. Like the people voted to give them the reins of power. So when there's an illegal power grab like Trump is engaged in, what are our levers? Well, one is the courts, right? So we don't have an army, right? The minority party Democratic senators, we don't have an army, so we can't go and compel the president to obey the law. We need to rely on the courts, or we need to rely on mobilization. And so there is going to be a moment very soon in which we're going to need not hundreds or thousands of people out on the street, but we're going to need tens of thousands of people out on the street, because historically, when democracies are threatened, it is only mass mobilization, and not just from the left, but mobilization from the left, the center, and the right, who recognize that their democracy is about to vanish. And we've got to be sowing the seeds, sort of laying the foundation for that mass public mobilization. We're going to probably need it pretty soon.
To that point then, we've already seen how the beginnings of that are sprouting up across the country. We've seen in these Republican town halls, even in deep red districts, I'm talking R plus 10, R plus 15, R plus 20, or 25. These are districts that are 25 points more conservative than the rest of the nation. And these guys are getting run out of their own town halls because they're being asked questions that they can't defend, because of course they can't defend them. They are indefensible. Why are you firing veterans is not a question that you have a correct answer for, because there is no correct answer for that. And so what is the answer now? Because we've just gotten guidance. We've just seen that Republicans got guidance from the NRCC saying, don't hold town halls, as opposed to here's the right thing to tell your constituents, or stand up for what your constituents are demanding of you. They're saying, screw that, just don't do the town halls altogether. And so what can Democrats do to leverage that opening here where, look, there are people in these districts who want answers, rightfully so, and now we know, because the guidance has been set down, the clarion call has been issued, that Republicans aren't going to go and talk to these folks?
Well, the first thing we can do is tell the whole story, right? And there's not one story about the billionaire takeover of government and then another story about the destruction of democracy. They're the same story, right? Nobody wants the billionaires to have their mitts into our Social Security and our data and our Medicare and our Medicaid. That's super unpopular. Like, nobody wants that. So the only way that you can get away with that, the only way that Elon Musk can get away with that, is to try to undermine the rule of law and democracy. Now, you do that just by canceling town halls, but you also do that by weaponizing the Department of Justice to try to, target dissenters, by normalizing political violence. So this story, right, is the same story. The destruction of democracy, which is necessary in order to get away with the thievery that is happening, the billionaires stealing from all of us. But Republicans are going to have a hard time hiding. They might not do town halls, but their constituents will show up to their offices. They're going to still do press conferences and school visits, and constituents will find them there. And then I think Democrats are going to probably have to sub in, right? We're going to have to go to Republican states and Republican districts and hold town halls so that, people all across this country, even if their own representatives are denying them the chance to weigh in, have a member of Congress to talk to. So we can convene a national conversation.
Would you be willing to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, I mean, I've been lucky in that, over the course of the last couple of months, a lot of people have, invested in me with small $5, $10 contributions. I'm going to, find a way to spend that money helping people mobilize all over the country, and, most likely target the places where the Republican congressmen are hiding.
Well, isn't it true that right now this is the easy part? I mean, this is the part where all we have as of right now is a budget resolution directing certain committees to be able to slash funding. So we have $880 billion that would be cut from energy and commerce. That's the committee that oversees Medicaid. $230 billion would be cut from the Agriculture Committee. That's the committee that oversees food stamps. So it hasn't happened yet, and Republicans have a layer of protection where they can say, well, I didn't sign my name onto anything that would Medicaid isn't even written in this bill. It merely says that we have to cut $880 billion in funding to energy and commerce, knowing full well that the only mathematical way to cut $880 billion from energy and commerce is to cut Medicaid. Same with $230 billion from ag, that's the only mathematical way to do that is to gut food stamps. And so aren't we going to get to the point where eventually we are going to have to prescribe the specific cuts, and then it's not just theoretical, then it's not just the firings of veterans, the gutting of education funding, the elimination of cancer research for kids. Then you've also got these massive programs that service tens or hundreds of millions of Americans in Medicaid and food stamps and whatever else they put on the chopping block that they actually do have to put their names on. And so things are only going to get worse for Republicans from here.
Well, and what's wonderful is that they're trying to have it both ways right now, right? They're out there saying, we just passed a bill to eliminate taxes on tips and taxes on Social Security benefits. Right, none of that's in the bill, right?
Right.
None of that's in the bill. But they deny the fact that they are cutting Medicaid. So they want credit for the popular stuff that isn't in the bill, and they want to ignore the fact that they're going to have to do some deeply unpopular stuff. So listen, here's where mobilization comes in. They have a super narrow majority in the House. They have a slightly bigger but very narrow majority in the Senate. In 2017, the number one thing they said they were going to do was repeal the Affordable Care Act. And they thought they were going to do it. They were sure they were going to do it. And we mobilized. We mobilized all across the country. We made it as impossible as we could. And they couldn't do it. Only by one vote, but they couldn't do it. And so here's our job now. Yeah, they passed that sort of blueprint by one vote. The nasty bill, the bill with the devastating cuts to Medicaid that will literally kick thousands of people off their insurance, they may not be able to pass it if we mobilize. So we still have enormous power in this moment because that final bill, they almost have to get every single Republican to vote for it. And so we only have to pick up 2 or 3 or 4, and that is totally possible.
We have the benefit right now, so to speak, of knowing what their justification to be able to make these cuts are. We know that they're going to come forward and say, everything that we're cutting from the budget right now is going to be waste, fraud, and abuse. And so if we see $880 billion, clearly these are just, thousands and thousands and thousands of people who are not even alive right now who are getting Medicaid benefits. We heard in Trump's presidential address that he was really digging in on this idea that there are tons of people getting Social Security benefits because they're hundreds of years old, 200, 300 years old. And so he's laying the foundation to have some type of a predicate to be able to point to justify the impending cuts. And so what do you say to these again, this excuse that we all know they're going to put forward to try and explain away the fact that they're making these massive cuts to these lifelines for the American people?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I could punch you in the nose and then tell you that I didn't punch you in the nose, but your nose is broken, right?
Yeah.
You feel
It's
it.
giving you a lot of credit. Full broken nose.
You want so maybe I couldn't get away with it, but the theory here is that they're going to punch people in the nose, say they didn't punch you in the nose, and think that people won't feel it. If you cut $880 billion out of Medicaid, rural hospitals close. Literally millions of people, maybe tens of millions of people lose their health insurance. Addiction treatment programs shut their doors. Everybody will feel an impact. Why? Because 1/4 of Americans, 1/4, get their health care from Medicaid. It pays for 2/3 of nursing home beds in this country. So they're going to come up with all sorts of excuses about how it's not going to impact people, and then it's going to impact people. And that's going to happen on top of an economy that is either just going to slow or start shrinking. And people are already feeling that. So that opening part of the speech in which he was like, the comeback, right? The economy is great. People don't believe that because they see their costs going up. They register consumer confidence going down.
They see the stock market tanking.
Right? So there's just only so much suspension of disbelief that can happen when your nose is broken.
Yeah. And do you have any worry that right-wing media's efforts to kind of insulate people in this bubble and pretend, very much in the same way that they were able to say that the economy during the Biden era, which of course was historically strong, was terrible? Do you have any worry that they're going to be able to insulate folks from the reality of what's going on?
Yeah, and this I do. And this is where it comes down to mechanics. I mean, this is a little bit inside, the game, but Democrats need to build our own infrastructure to get our message out. The reality is that objective, kind of down the middle, right, journalism still exists, but they have a mechanism to get the lies out. We have to have a mechanism to get the truth out right now. And the truth is, the billionaires are taking over the government. Medicaid is going to be destroyed. It's going to impact you. Costs are going to continue to go up. And so we need to make sure that we have the avenues to tell the truth.
Senator Murphy, I appreciate you taking the time.
Appreciate it. Thanks, man.